Hello. Today we will be taking you through the sustainability vision of Carry Logistics Network, KLN, and the various sustainability initiatives in which the group is engaged. This training video is produced by Deloitte Carbon Care Asia, a leading provider of sustainability consultancy services in Hong Kong and beyond, who has been supporting KLN on various services since 2020, including reporting, policy development, target setting, training, and others. Through this video, we will introduce KLN's vision of sustainable development, our path to net zero, our involvement with the United Nations Global Compact, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the various actions we are taking towards sustainable development, our principle of transparency, and finally, how all this content relates to you. We'd first like to introduce the concept of sustainable development and KLN's vision. Sustainable development is defined as development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is development that's able to balance the needs of people, planet, and prosperity. Our planet's resources are under severe pressure due to our overconsumption of energy, food, water, metals, minerals, and other natural resources. Because of our overconsumption, the top 10 most severe risks we are facing on a global scale over the next 10 years include climate action failure, extreme weather, biodiversity loss, livelihood crises, lack of social cohesion, infectious diseases, human environmental damage, natural resource crises, debt crises, and geo-economic confrontation. To combat these issues, we have established a number of policies spanning governance, environmental, and social issues, which form the guiding principles of our sustainability framework. KLN's sustainability vision is to integrate sustainability into our corporate strategy. We invite you to take a closer look at KLN's sustainability vision and policies on our website after this video. In the meantime, let us go through the various elements that make up KLN's sustainability vision and strategy. We seek to integrate sustainability into KLN's corporate strategy by making long-term commitments, setting near-term targets, and taking tangible actions. This vision is supported by three principles: commitment, action, and transparency, which guide the various initiatives that we are involved in. KLN's vision of sustainable development is further demonstrated through our commitment to net zero carbon emissions, the United Nations Global Compact, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, let's go through each of these initiatives one by one. Let's go through what net zero actually means. Net zero emissions mean achieving an overall balance between greenhouse gas emissions produced and taken out of the atmosphere. To reach net zero, emissions can still be produced so long as these emissions are offset by processes such as restoring forests, direct air capture and storage, and other technologies. Therefore, the more emissions produced, the more carbon dioxide needs to be removed in order to reach net zero. Under the Paris Agreement, countries around the globe have agreed to limit global temperature warming to well below 2 degrees and ideally to 1.5 degrees compared to pre-industrial levels. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC for short, has warned that human influence has warmed the climate at an unprecedented rate. If we fail to limit global temperature rise, we will all face increasingly severe climate change impacts, such as melting ice and rising sea levels, devastating heat waves, intense storms and flooding, and other impacts. If the world collectively is able to reach net zero by 2050, we stand a chance of keeping warming within 1.5 degrees and mitigating these severe impacts. Therefore, it is highly critical for emissions reductions to begin immediately. Multinational corporates everywhere have recognized this need, and in recent years, many peers in the transportation sector, such as DHL, FedEx, Kuehne+Nagel, Cathay Pacific, and others, have all come forward with their net zero emissions targets and pledges. However, reaching net zero will require unprecedented societal transformation and international cooperation. Global clean energy investment will need to triple by 2030, and we will collectively need to shift away from the use of fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and gas. We will also need to push for large-scale behavior change by global citizens to transition their daily habits, such as replacing car trips with walking, cycling, or public transport, reducing food waste and use of single-use plastics, or limiting the number of flights they take a year. These are some examples of solutions to reduce greenhouse gases. At the company level, we may wish to invest in clean energy and efficiency, retrofit decarbonized buildings, and switch to electric vehicles. At the individual level, employees may choose to increase green modes of transportation, such as public transport, cycling, and walking, or switch to a plant-based diet. KLN is committed to reaching net zero carbon emissions from its operations and value chain by 2050. To do so, we will need to reduce our emissions in our own operations, such as our warehouses and vehicles, as well as our upstream and downstream operations, such as in subcontracting services, freights, and shipping, and others. We will also need to consider actions such as carbon reduction initiatives and greater investment in renewable energy sources. For example, solar panels can be installed subject to local availability. Next, let's introduce the United Nations Global Compact, or UNGC for short. The UNGC is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative based on voluntary commitments to implement universal sustainability principles and to take steps to support the goals of the United Nations. It is a call for companies everywhere to align their strategies and operations with the universal principles on human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption, and to take actions that advance societal goals. The UNGC has 6 focus areas, namely environment, social, governance, sustainable development, sustainable finance, and supply chain. The UNGC aims to support companies in 2 areas. Firstly, to support companies in doing business responsibly by aligning their strategies and operations with the 10 principles of the UNGC. Secondly, to take strategic actions that advance broader societal goals, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which we will further explore in the next section. Corporate sustainability starts with a company's value system and a principles-based approach to doing business. This means operating in ways that meet fundamental responsibilities in the areas of human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. These are the focus areas that the 10 principles of the UNGC are based on, which are outlined here. By integrating these principles into their strategies, policies, and procedures and establishing a culture of integrity, companies are not only upholding their basic responsibilities to people and planet, but also setting the stage for long-term success. The UNGC provides a universal language for corporate responsibility, and many companies join this initiative in order to further their sustainability progress. To date, over 13,000 companies and over 3,800 non-business participants have joined UNGC, with the number of signatories growing every year. KLN is one of 364 signatories within the industrial transportation industry. As a signatory of UNGC, we are taking an important public step towards sustainable development by conducting business through a principled approach. By joining UNGC, we have made a voluntary commitment to annually disclose the company's progress on sustainability initiatives, to share sustainable development learnings with the industry, and to accelerate the development of sustainable logistics solutions. Next, let's provide an overview of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or the UNSDGs for short. The SDGs, also known as the Global Goals, were adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure that by 2030 all people enjoy peace and prosperity. The 17 SDGs are integrated. They recognize that action in one area will affect outcomes in others, and that development must balance social, economic, and environmental sustainability. To overcome this global challenge, creativity, know-how, technology, financial resources, and collaboration from all society will be needed. There are 17 goals, under which there are also 169 targets and 230 indicators to measure progress towards these goals. The SDGs address a range of social needs, including education, health, social protection, and job opportunities, while also tackling climate change and environmental protection. Particularly in the wake of COVID-19, the SDGs represent an opportunity to focus the world's recovery towards greener, stronger, more inclusive, and more resilient societies. We have identified 5 goals as priorities for our objectives, namely SDG 8, 12, 13, 16, and 17. SDG 8, Decent Work and Economic Growth, aims to promote sustained and inclusive economic growth in order to drive progress, create decent jobs for all, and improve living standards. SDG 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, aims to ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns and is about decoupling economic growth from environmental degradation, increasing resource efficiency, and promoting sustainable lifestyles. SDG 13, Climate Action, aims to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts, recognizing that climate change affects every country on every continent, disrupts national economies, and affects lives across the globe. SDG 16, Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions, aims to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, as well as providing access to justice for all in order to build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Finally, SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals, aims to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize global partnerships for sustainable development, as a successful development agenda requires inclusive partnerships at the global, regional, and local levels. So, what other actions are we taking to progress towards sustainable development? We are committed to taking action to reduce the carbon emissions we emit in our business operations through carbon reduction. To do this, we have established a comprehensive baseline for our greenhouse gas emissions across our worldwide operations, and will be announcing our carbon reduction targets throughout our operations this year in 2022. Furthermore, we will explore the alignment of science-based targets across our supply chain in order to continue progress towards our net zero carbon emissions target. We are also committed to meeting our targets through an exploration of renewable energy opportunities. As part of KLN's carbon management strategy, we will take steps to reduce our carbon footprint by increasing the use of renewable energy in our operations. Given the diversity of countries in which we operate, we will encourage the use of renewable energy wherever practicable. We are also committed to the principle of transparency in our sustainable journey. In a climate where the number of businesses and countries setting net zero commitments is constantly rising, we understand the importance of transparent disclosures and measurements to ensure that KLN's sustainability vision is seen as credible. Our stakeholders are demanding new levels of information regarding businesses, their operations, and the products they offer. And transparent evidence of how net zero claims will be met is increasingly demanded. Transparent disclosures are also critical in order to avoid an impression of greenwashing, which means conveying a false impression that a company's products or operations are more sustainable than they actually are. We enact our principle of transparency through the 3 following initiatives: KLN's carbon offset policy, which governs our approach to carbon offsetting and our procurement of verified carbon credits; alignment with the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, a set of recommendations established by the Financial Stability Board; and participation in CDP, an international nonprofit organization that helps companies and cities disclose their environmental impact. We will now take a closer look at each of these initiatives in turn. As part of KLN's commitment to achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050, we have in place a carbon offset policy. Currently, this policy focuses on carbon credits generated from project-based activities from which most of the carbon credits are sourced. The policy is made up of 3 components displayed here in a hierarchical order. First and foremost, avoid. We will show preferences for business decisions and actions that avoid greenhouse gas emissions to minimize the need for offsets in the first place. Next is reduce. Where emissions cannot be avoided, we will seek to reduce our emissions through the improvement of energy efficiency and conservation. Finally is compensate. Where we cannot avoid or reduce emissions, any offsetting activity is taken to neutralize remaining emissions should be realized through high-quality carbon credits procured from accredited registries. Furthermore, we have developed a set of robust criteria to guide our identification and procurement of high-quality carbon credits to offset the remaining emissions in our value chain. We apply the following criteria when selecting projects to invest in, which have been informed by international standards set by accredited registries. As a global logistics company, KLN prioritizes carbon offset projects that contribute to both environmental and community benefits, particularly for low-income or vulnerable communities. We invite you to take a closer look at KLN's carbon offset policy on our website after this video. Next is KLN's alignment with the recommendations of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD in short. TCFD aims to integrate climate-related issues into corporate business strategies in order to promote a transition to a low-carbon economy. The recommendations are widely adoptable and applicable to organizations across sectors and jurisdictions. Recognizing the link between climate-related risks and the financial impacts on their business, corporates are increasingly looking to align their disclosures with the TCFD's recommendations. In step with this global trend, we have taken steps to become a supporter of TCFD and are committed to implementing TCFD recommendations by 2025. During this process, we will increase our transparency on climate-related risks and opportunities and implement climate actions in tandem with the contributions of our suppliers and customers. The TCFD recommendations are structured around 4 areas that represent core elements of how organizations operate: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. To begin with, governance recommends disclosures around the organization's governance around climate-related risks and opportunities. Strategy comes next, which recommends disclosures of actual and potential impacts of climate-related risks and opportunities on an organization's businesses, strategy, and financial planning. Furthermore, risk management recommends disclosures on how the organization identifies, assesses, and manages climate-related risks. And lastly, metrics and targets recommends the disclosures of the metrics and targets used to assess and manage relevant climate-related risks and opportunities. There are a number of reasons why TCFD is increasingly adopted and may soon become an industry norm. TCFD encourages the transparent disclosure of climate-related financial impacts, which allows investors to make informed investment decisions. Aligning their disclosures with TCFD recommendations also enables companies to identify and build resilience against climate risks, which can in turn increase both internal and external stakeholder confidence. Outside of mitigating actual and potential risk, applying the recommendations of the TCFD may also allow companies to capture emerging opportunities during this global transition to a low-carbon economy. And finally, alignment with the TCFD recommendations ensures compliance and forward preparation for future government policies. For example, Hong Kong regulatory agencies have already proposed mandatory TCFD-aligned disclosures for listed companies by 2025, and China and Hong Kong have respectively set net zero goals, which will likely see a continued evolution of disclosure policy changes. Lastly is CDP, a nonprofit charity that runs a global disclosure system for investors, companies, cities, states, and regions to manage their environmental impacts. CDP takes the information that is supplied in its annual reporting process and scores companies based on their journey through disclosure and towards environmental leadership. Through its independent scoring methodology, CDP measures corporate progress and incentivizes action on climate change, forest, and water security. We are committed to participation in CDP to track our progress in carbon management and emissions reduction. In 2021, we obtained a CDP score of C in climate change and a score of D in supplier engagement, and aim to improve the score over time through the implementation of our various sustainability initiatives. After all this is said, how is sustainability relevant to you? When it comes to sustainable development, what's important to remember is that there is no backup plan. There is no planet B that we can escape to if Earth becomes uninhabitable due to climate change and biodiversity collapse. The time to act is now, and as global citizens, we must all do our part to protect our present and future generation by building an inclusive, sustainable, and resilient tomorrow for both people and the planet. KLN's vast network and resources can be leveraged for each of you to focus on making positive impacts. There are many ways in which you can contribute. You can start with taking time to understand KLN's commitments, as well as taking an active interest in learning more about global sustainability trends, facilitating KLN's pillar of transparency by supporting the company in effective and accurate data collection to inform credible action, and communicating any ideas you may have to your local manager or other senior members of your team on actions that may help KLN achieve its sustainability goals. Sustainable development can only be achieved if everyone comes together, and KLN's path to sustainability needs the support of each and every one of you. We hope this training video was useful and informative, and we invite you to take a further look at the following materials to gain a deeper understanding of sustainability concepts as well as our own initiatives. For more information, please contact sustainability@kln.com.